Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tending to Change. I'm your host, Jenny Juarez. So, before we dive into this week's episode, I just want to take a moment and reflect on where we've been so far. The first two episodes, we talked quite a bit about autopilot and habits and routines and how we can use mindfulness or stillness practices to help us reclaim our attention and begin to transform our lives, shifting into the direction that we'd really like to be living. It may be obvious to you already, but I'm equal parts sciencey, analytical, psychological, and deeply spiritual. And I really love to live at that intersection where science and spirituality meet. That's just my comfort spot. So even though I've been hitting upon these more analytical, psychological aspects, over time, I'll be bringing in these deeper layers of reconnecting to our heart and to the presence of the bigger energy, or God, or the divine, or the universe, however you refer to it, however you relate to it. But that's really the ultimate goal of any spiritual practice. We're looking to sync up to or reestablish the connection to that unifying energy in our lives. But backing up, I'd like to talk today about the preciousness of human attention and why it can be so difficult to establish a mindfulness practice. The mind is an exquisite tool for processing the astronomical amount of data we take in every moment of every day. But it's important to understand that the default mode of our brain is based on efficiency. I mean, imagine if you needed to consciously focus on every single task in a day, like every breath, every beat of your heart, every step, getting dressed, preparing food, you'd be exhausted. So when the brain registers habit patterns, it allows these processes to become unconscious, which frees up our brain for more nuanced or complex tasks. We've talked about this before. When the brain gets too good at this, we find ourselves operating in autopilot for a lot of our lives. And the reclamation of attention is made all the more difficult due to the prominence of social media in our lives. And I know the irony of that because I'm presenting these podcast episodes to you through social media channels, but I would argue that it's not the technology per se that is harmful, but the way that it can be used. There's a lot of nuance here. And so we have to understand how we can use these tools in a supportive and beneficial way. American comedian and musician Bo Burnham described it this way in an interview. They're coming for every second of your life. It's not because they're bad or evil. It's because companies like Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram went public to shareholders. So now they have to grow. And the only way to make a profit is to capture more of their audience's engagement. Human attention is the new frontier of colonization. Every single free moment you have is a moment you could be looking at your phone and they can gather information so they can target ads at you. So I've heard it said a different way by, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he said, if a product is free to you, that means you are the product. So with these social media apps, because we don't have to pay to use them, it's important for us to realize that we're actually the product being sold to all the companies that want to advertise to us. And so between autopilot and corporate targeting of our attention, intentionality and living in the moment become radical acts of freedom. Spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, chanting, yoga, tai chi, time in nature, making art, all of these things help us to strengthen our capacity to remain conscious to the present moment. Author and professor Mirabai Starr says in her book Wild Mercy, the truth is changing habits is not easy. It takes equal parts commitment and self-compassion because we will stumble and may need to begin again a million times. But beginning again is the practice. It is the moment that we wake up and realize, I wasn't paying attention to what's most important to me. Something else that I recently came across and would like to share with you is the term of continuous partial attention. This is a phrase that was coined by Linda Stone, who is a former Apple and Microsoft executive, and she coined this phrase in 1998. It describes a form of complex multitasking in which we attempt to constantly monitor our environment scanning for things that might be more important, with the result of being unable to focus on anything. It happens when we try to pay full attention to more than one activity at the same time while also checking for something else that might be more important or interesting. The result of continuous partial attention is a constant triggering of our fight or flight response, which causes us high levels of stress, a sense of constant crisis, and artificial sincerity. It's actually an adaptive behavior because it's the result of our highly connected, technology driven, fast paced culture. I mean, everyone experiences this, but if you ask any mother whether they're working outside or within the home, they will confirm that the expectations we place on ourselves nowadays are simply too high. They're totally unachievable. We are so concerned with success, whatever that means, that we have forgotten the value of just being. Now it's called laziness or unproductivity, as if every single second of our day needs to be productive and monetized. And because of this, we have forfeited a more intimate connection with those around us. Not only that, but we're now so used to living like this that to intentionally slow down, put away our phones, and pay purposeful attention to only one task at a time feels unfamiliar at best and deeply distressing at worst. So many of us can barely stand our own company. This was especially highlighted to me when I was going more into my mindfulness and yoga practices, and a friend of mine was going through a difficult time. I offered to guide her into a meditation, and the first thing I did was ask her to close her eyes and focus on her breath. Closing her eyes and slowing down and just breathing actually created a fight or flight response in her body. It was so unfamiliar to slow down and be deeply embodied and present that it actually created panic in her instead. And I was just shocked and I felt terrible. But I later realized that this is the value of trauma-informed languaging around teaching these practices. For example, I can say, if it feels comfortable, close your eyes or gently soften and lower the gaze. This gives people a sense of choice so that they can understand that there's not one right way to do these practices. It's about what is comfortable for you and what you will actually consistently do. But back to the continuous partial attention thing. I mean, I see this in our children very clearly with TikTok and Snapchat and all the other apps fighting for their attention. How many teenagers do you know who will be doing their homework while listening to music while also watching a video on YouTube? Even a lot of videos on YouTube and TikTok these days will have a split screen where you're watching someone doing something like draw a picture or make food, and on the other side of the screen is someone communicating the main point of the video. I mean, this is such a stark example of what continuous partial attention is. How can we really be deeply learning a concept in our studies if we're listening to music while watching a video or watching two videos while reading? It is impossible. We think we're multitasking, but the brain can't actually multitask. So what happens instead is our brain is constantly switching back and forth between these competing stimuli. And the result is we're paying a very degraded attention to everything, and none of it is really soaking in. Another great example of this was when a friend of mine was sharing that she was at dinner on a date with someone, and the whole time she's sitting across from this gentleman thinking to herself, okay, nod, smile, say so it sounds like you're paying attention. She's thinking about how she's looking, she's adjusting herself, shifting her posture. The whole time she realizes she's not paying attention at all to what this guy is saying. She's coaching herself in her mind of how to look like she's paying attention. And that might sound funny, but we're all guilty of this sometimes. And that's probably a generous statement. Because how many times has someone introduced themselves to you and you instantly forget their name? And it's because you were not even listening when they said what their name was. I know that this has happened to me many times. So this is not easy. And that is why I'm spending this time going slowly to talk about why this is an issue, why it's important and valuable, and that it's okay to take it slow when you're first learning how to overcome these habits. So, again, going back to that Moshe Feldenkrais quote, you can't do what you want until you know what you're doing. Am I breathing? What am I trying to avoid right now? Where's my attention? These are some questions that we can ask ourselves when we find ourselves getting distracted. So I'm inviting us to learn how to look at our day-to-day experiences with awareness, curiosity, and compassion so that we can then begin to live in a way that matches our desires and our goals, in a way that gives us meaning and joy and satisfaction. Through these conversations, I want to invite us to reclaim our intuition, our felt awareness and wisdom that lives inside our body. It's precognitive, that feeling in the belly or in the chest that tells you something is off or that something feels right. That happens before any thoughts actually register in our mind. But it's so subtle that we really need to be able to slow down and quiet ourselves internally to be able to tap into it. I want to invite us to trust the flow of the river of life, no matter the challenges, no matter how things are changing. Because when we create space in our mind, in our body, and our heart, we're better able to accept and allow what is in the present moment. This letting be brings us into alignment and harmony with reality. And it's only from this space of radical affirmation, of saying yes, and this too, can we truly discern the best next step to take in our lives. This means a radical, to the root acceptance of who we are, of whatever emotions, thoughts, or sensations are present, and of what is going on around us. This does not mean we like what's going on. It's about the courage to accept the reality of it with an open heart. Living in this way is true integrity, and it opens the path to deep healing and freedom. Why? Because when we stop denying or pushing away reality, we release an immense amount of bound energy that can be used for something else. This is my wish for all of us. A loving friendliness toward ourselves, just as we are, which can then extend beyond us and into the world, which is the bigger us, since we are all interconnected and interdependent within the entire web of life. This is where we rediscover our wholeness and our peace despite whatever is coming up. So let's close out today's episode with a brief practice of breathing from our heart space. I'm not talking about your anatomical heart, but your spiritual heart, which is in the center of the chest and the sternum. So taking a comfortable seat, again, you can choose to close the eyes or just soften the gaze and lower it to a space in front of you. Feel the weight of your body in the chair or on the floor. And lengthen the spine in both directions, both sending grounding energy through the sitting bones into the earth below you, and lengthening the spine through the neck and the crown of the head upward. Turning your awareness inside, breathing in and out the nose. Now begin to imagine as though you're breathing in from your heart space and breathing out from your heart space. Continue just this gentle breathing in and out from the center of the chest. Taking 1 or 2 more rounds of breath in and out from this heart space. Now opening the eyes or lifting the gaze. Just notice how you feel in your body right now. What was that like for you, breathing in and out from the heart? We're not assigning any judgment, just noticing, what did that feel like? Thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to walk this path with you. I look forward to getting together again very soon. And I would encourage you throughout this week to try this practice at least once a day. Maybe before you get out of bed in the morning or just before sleep. Just take a moment to breathe 3 or 5 rounds of breath from the heart space. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon.